Warning, this podcast may contain reference to abuse of a physical, verbal, or sexual nature. This podcast may also include opinions that people do not agree with. Thank you for listening. Once again, we're live.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I'm Ray.
And I'm Ryan.
And this is Creativity, where we just sit, we chat, we rant, and we, cause verbal anarchy or whatever.
While having a good cup of tea.
Every time.
Oh, that's a lovely brew.
I'm either going to be calling this episode Verbal Anarchy or Tea Slurp Sounds.
Oh, God. Either or. Welcome to your new ASMR experience. Through a rant. So, where to begin?
I will let you start there, because I've seen the shopping list.
Yeah. So, the past wee while, we've seen freak weather. On a scale as has never properly been seen in years. Germany underwater, China underwater,
London underwater.
London underwater, Stratford also underwater. I saw the video of that one as the water was pouring into that train station. It literally looks like a scene out of Titanic.
It does. I've got family that live in the Newham Stratford area, and they were saying it was as bad as it looked in the video. Jesus,
it's just insane. And if that isn't incentive enough to actually do something about climate change, what is? We've already seen the destruction climate change is causing. There have been violent shifts in weather. There have been incredibly violent floods, landslides. The temperatures are rising. Like, this summer is the hottest I've ever felt it.
I have never had a summer this... I mean, I've had summers this hot, but I've never had it this, close and this, tropical.
Yeah, it's just unreal. And I'm sat here expiring the whole way. And even at night, I'm struggling to sleep because it's just so close. Having a wide open window and having a fan on full blast, it's doing nothing.
Yeah, it's I normally, I feel this kind of heat and that when I'm in London during June for Comic-Con and that. And normally that's just before the lightning and that strikes London every year. And me and my partner will sit there and have fans on, windows open, and not be able to sleep down there. And we're every single time we're down there, we're can't wait to get back to Scotland. It's freezing up here. Jesus Christ, it's not freezing anymore.
Exactly. Scotland being so close in proximity to the Arctic Circle, it's meant to be cooler up here.
Yeah.
It's genuinely not. And we also saw this kind of heat, worse so, in that heat dome that was over Oregon, Washington, and Canada on the west coast of North America. That's insane.
Terrifying. That's what it... I mean, everyone sits there... I say everyone, not everyone, because, people have brains, but so many times I've heard... Oh, it's only that kind of thing happens in movies, that kind of thing only. Oh, it's all make-believe, it's all fear-mongering, and then it's look out your window. It's not fear-mongering anymore, it's reality. It's the end of the world.
Yeah.
Fix it.
The amount of times I've made the analogy, it feels like the day after tomorrow out there.
It's getting to that point.
It's getting to that point. And it's just unreal. Though obviously there'd be no violent changes in the weather as is in that film, but we do see
it's been worse.
It's
still.
Worse. At the same time, it's it's bad.
Yeah. We've never as much as it's not instant absolute zero kind of thing.
No.
We've never seen floods like this.
No.
I've never seen an entire fifth of London underwater before.
Never. Absolutely not. But see, this is the interesting thing, actually. To bring up the day after tomorrow, the theory that it propounds about the North Atlantic current, how it shifts and stuff like that, and that's what drives such extreme weather. That is actually more than possible, and it actually does happen. It happens quite... actually happens I think it's every 100 years. I'm not sure, but it's when the current shifts, because the reason why we have such warm weather usually is because of that North Atlantic current. But when it shifts, when it moves southwards, that's when air becomes a lot cooler. It becomes colder and stuff like that.
I mean, we in Scotland are right, we're one of those countries that are right at the heart of that shift, because we feel that every single year. We get the beautiful warm tropical currents coming up from the south to us, which is why our west coast is so much more tropical. Like, we have palm trees on the west coast in Scotland in some places. And then on the east coast, which is where we live, it's freezing nearly all the time because of the North Sea, and that it's mostly glacial.
Yeah, it's very wet. It's very damp. It's very glacial. Our entire ecosystem on this side was completely covered in ice, and ice formed most of this landscape. But it's also, there's the clash as well, not just glacial. This is also volcanic land.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, quite a substantial number of millions of years ago, probably until like the mid to late Cretaceous, the entire Dundee area was actually very active volcanically.
You can still see the basalt flats if you go to the right areas in Dundee, from what I've heard.
And like, our volcano's been extinct for a very, very long time. There's...
Much like Edinburgh's one.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, yeah, the castle in Edinburgh is built on a volcano. All of that is...
was a super volcano, because that's a caldera.
That is a caldera. It's also a valley that's been carved by glacial ice. Yes, it's very much a mixture.
Yeah, it started as a caldera, got frozen over, made deeper, and then kind of like shoveled out as the ice moved. So Scotland's got a landscape of a lot of different weather types.
Basically, it's literally Middle Earth. It's your budget Middle Earth.
Yeah, we're Middle Earth on a discount because New Zealand got a bigger budget.
Basically, yes. But no, things like weather in The Day After Tomorrow, as it's explained, there is basis in science for such a thing to happen, but it would never be as violent as that, though there'd never be like a storm surge as powerful as the one that takes out New York in the film, makes that massive tidal wave.
Yeah.
Tornadoes would never be as violent in Los Angeles, though California does have its run of tornadoes. They're never that catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, even like I think, was it last year, even Dundee had a tornado.
Dundee, Scotland gets its fair share. They're usually either F1 or F2.
Yeah, they're never strong.
No, they're never strong, but they are powerful.
Yeah.
They still do damage. The most I've seen, I remember, this was years ago now, I was very young, was the waterspout on the Tay.
I heard about that.
Yeah, I saw it. It was years ago, but you just saw this massive funnel. There's, the scary thing about this is water spouts usually just drop from the sky and land on the water. I can never remember how much damage it caused. I don't think it was that much.
It would have been amazing.
It was there. Oh yeah, it was terrifying, but it was so cool. Like, being an avid fan of Twister when I was younger, it was sat there just going like, oh, storm chasing, yes.
But yeah, seeing the violent weather shift. I mean, again, it's like you said, it's not as violent as in Day After Tomorrow, but in comparison to when we were kids, it's violent. And if you take the entire age of the Earth, providing you're not a creationist, this is barely a blip. You know,
this is barely a blip. Like, our planet has gone through catastrophic change like this many, many times,
but none of it's been humanity's fault. Like, the Earth's been through tons of changes due to asteroid attacks, due to supervolcano chain reactions, due to Mars crashing into it, you know, long before life existed on this planet. Like, we've gone through so many geological and environmental changes. But the fact that we as a species have created an event akin to that wiped out the dinosaurs is, you kind of need to look at yourselves when you look at one extinction level event and go, oh no, that was terrible. And then you look at an extinction level event going on right now and go, oh, extinction level events are just myth, right? It's like,
And obviously, the deadline being 30 years from now, it's no excuse for them to say, oh, we could sort this out in 30 years. No.
Yeah, it's like we said before, we needed to start 30 years ago.
We need it to start now.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, we have, what was it, we've got the COP26 coming up in Glasgow next week or something? No, November. It's in November. Which they're meant to find an agreeable solution to the climate issue. Now, we tried this, what was it, 2 months ago? With the G20. in which we couldn't. And rather than, like, I don't know how things work in these kind of politics. If there is a politician that has managed to bear through this, or you just hate us so much that you hate listening to us at this point, you know, I would love an explanation as to how the G20 works, because to have, 3 countries out of 20 say, no, we don't want to get rid of coal, meant that no country had to get rid of coal, I think is kind of dumb. I feel like it's the responsibility and the moral obligation of Britain, Germany, America.
These world leaders.
Yeah. To, even if, like, again, in this case, it was China, Middle East, and Russia said no to getting rid of coal. And it's like, so, yeah, 3 countries say no. 17 countries should still do it. Whether they have a legal obligation or not, they have a moral... Yeah, they have a moral obligation to get rid of coal, to get rid of fossil fuels, to somehow find a way of fixing this huge issue of we don't have a carbon sink anymore. Like, the Earth is only going to heat up worse now. We can't stop that without anything short of a miracle. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that if there is any form of, you know, divine deity up there, he is not sending down a miracle anytime soon.
No, if there is something up there, if there is someone up there, I believe they stopped listening long ago. Long ago.
I agree. I feel like they probably stopped listening after people started using their name as an excuse to completely ignore everything they supposedly want to teach. You'll love thy neighbor. That means murder everyone that doesn't agree with you.
And
sure.
There's also the possibility of him or her psychopathically going, this is all part of the great plan.
Oh, yes, that wonderful, the ineffable plan.
But no, it just feels incredulous. Like, I wake up and I look outside and I'm sat there, it's a lovely day. And then I see the news and it's just one bad thing after another. Like, I never thought I'd live to see the death of the Great Barrier Reef.
Yeah, I thought that we'd never let it get to that point.
Coral bleaching is what it's called, and it's killing everything. And to essentially watch the sea become this hot soup devoid of life, when really there are so many beautiful things on this planet, so many fantastic creatures, so many beautiful sights, and mankind just takes that completely for granted.
Yeah, I feel like me and my partner were watching Matrix. Like, I was catching her up because she hadn't seen any of the trilogy. So we had marathoned all 3 movies, and I feel like, interestingly enough, the Wachowski siblings, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name there, but those 2 actually, I feel, got the future scarily spot on, with the idea that technology would hit a saturation point where it couldn't, like, Earth doesn't have the resources to advance technology any further. And so we'd end up with this kind of like semi-diesel, semi-cyberpunk sort of technological world where the only thing that can and should survive is machines, because humans killed all life on it. And I weirdly, like, you have all these, like, things about the future where it's like, look at all this advanced utopia technology. Humans are never going to get to that point, in my opinion. Watching the world fall apart and all that's left is cables and wires. Humans are never going to get to that point.
No, utopia doesn't exist because we have never found a way to bring that about. So essentially we create our own dystopia.
Well, yeah, I mean, even me and you, in a way, are a prime example of that constant discordance, because, of course, like, utopia is a, relative term, where it's, you know, one person's utopia could be another person's hell. And we're a prime example of that. We are here on a podcast opposing what's going wrong with the world, but, I mean, if you take a look at the people causing the trouble in the world, they're sitting there paying, like, 20 billion to go into space for 5 minutes, being like, this is wonderful, the world is amazing. It's like, for you, maybe.
I know, but that's the thing. And I saw this post not that long ago. It feels insane that 2 men should have the wealth of a nation for such a space race, for literally a dick measuring contest.
Yeah.
On who can get into space or who can get into space quicker. And Elon Musk says those who attack space forget that space means hope. There is no hope. Not for us.
Yeah, no.
Because
It's hope for the rich. It's not hope for us.
And then again, it's not even hope for the rich. The rich won't survive up there because I remember the last person who went into space, I can never remember their name, but they went into space for 1 year and they retired from being an astronaut because they couldn't handle being up there for 1 year. You just know they will drive themselves mad.
Yeah, and of course, what kind of economic growth will there be when there's nothing left?
Exactly.
Which is an insane thing that I'm looking at, is so many countries coming out of the pandemic are trying to ramp production up to regrow their already destroyed economies, but on a system that we've proven via the pandemic. A system that doesn't work.
It is so fragile, it does not work.
But to try and sit there and rebuild it for the sake of, a very profound question at this point, who are they rebuilding the economy for? Because it's not me or you.
No.
We don't profit off of it. I doubt any of our listeners profit off of the current economy. So who, other than the people who are in charge of it, win? And who's allowed to be in charge of it, other than the people who are in charge choose? I don't see the point in an economy that is so, as you say, fragile.
It's just insane, really. And the fact that we let it, mainly because it's always been seen to be that way.
Yeah.
Like, we've sort of fallen into the mindset of it's always been that way, there's nothing we can do to change it. That's bullshit in itself, because people have changed it before.
We changed it to the working system we have. I was speaking to an ex-archaeologist the other day, and she was saying that archaeologists pointed out that humans, they used to spend a lot of time outside and that kind of thing, and we sit there and look as if, they used to work 80 hours a week to get their food as hunter. No, there are evolved almost nicks in their hips where men used to stay squatted for hours chatting and just gabbering on while they waited for something to hunt. It wasn't, they weren't running for all this time. They were sitting there just waiting, chatting, enjoying themselves, just having a relaxed day, and, oh look, there's a boar. Stab. All right, we're done. Let's go back to chatting.
And see, the way they kept active, obviously, it was through travel.
Yeah.
And there was more than enough to do in those times. My favourite example, actually, is, the entirety of The Chronicles of Ancient Darkness. It's a series by Michelle Paver. It's a kids' series, and it's set during the Stone Age in Scandinavia, about a boy, his best friend, who then becomes his mate, and Wolf, who's a wolf.
Yeah.
And it's so rich and so detailed in that way. It's to hunt, it was very opportunistic. You had to track it, you had to follow it, and you waited for the right moment, and you spent your time with family when the hunt was done.
Yeah.
And you spent your time with community around the fire telling stories.
Yeah, your time was full of, even when you're out hunting, to an extent, it was still revelry. It was still a sense of your life had, even though you were just surviving, your life was okay, and I'm not, glorifying the times of, when one disease could wipe out the entire human race kind of thing, or when we all lived in caves. But the idea that now our entire lives need to, I don't want to say we're stuck behind a computer screen, because computers has definitely helped bring the world together. They're kind of forcing people to open up the box a little bit more. But we are very much forced into boxes, into cubicles. We're separated from people, and we're told you are to do your singular function with no communication beyond what your purpose that I have granted you is. And your reward is not even, it's about half as much as you need for the very basic that you need to continue existing, let alone living. And it's like you said, in a previous episode, we don't live anymore. We don't have what we need to live. And now the environment's rotting around us because of, in a lack of a better term, because of higher-ups in corporations refusing to change their ways. A lot of people wonder why our generation is apathetic and hopeless, and why we look around and our generation has the highest rate of suicides and that. And they can sit there and be like, it's because of this, it's because that, it's because the gays be suicidal. It's no, it's because people don't see point anymore.
People see no hope.
Yeah, we can't look to the future and be like, oh my god, yes, my kids are going to be able to grow up in a wonderful world where there's going to be advanced technology and medicine for all. We look and go, we don't want kids. We don't want to raise kids in a world with an environment that can't sustain us, where their entire purpose is going to be working to the bone, running up and down an Amazon warehouse just so they can sleep in a tent outside. It's disgraceful, for lack of a better word.
It is disgraceful. The Western world should be ashamed of itself. And like every corner of the world should be ashamed of itself, because
it's not just the West.
It's not just the West, it's everywhere. We have allowed ourselves as a species to become complacent with what we have. And it's also the fact of we're also always seeking more. We're never happy with what we actually have. That was and that's the thing, how you said you're not glorifying the times and stuff like that, but it's a fact of back then
you could have a sense of contentment.
Yeah, we had what we needed.
Yeah.
And that was all that mattered. But now there's this influx of commercialism. And Steinbeck actually said it best. I can't remember if it was in one of his books or if it was in one of his letters, but he'd said, if I wanted to destroy a country, I would simply give it too much. That way I would have it on its knees, lethargic, sick, and slowly dying within itself.
Yeah.
Literally just give a country too much and you have it on its knees.
Yeah, and it's hard because you once you have all that, like, again, take us down in the lower class and that, like, we can sit there and be like, we're not happy with this. We're not happy with the lack of gay rights. We're not happy with the lack of, any equal rights to that. We're not happy with the way the police treat people. We're not happy with the way the government hoards the money, or that corporations are allowed to hoard money. And they can turn around and go, but you're allowed to rent houses. You're allowed to have McDonald's. And it's like, but
that's not enough.
That's not what we want. People in our generation especially are left wanting, not because we're entitled, but because we're missing a key component of what makes humanity, which is the ability to... I'm trying to find a word in the English dictionary here, but I'm pretty sure they didn't put one in for this reason. But we're missing the key component that makes us human, which is the ability to find joy in what we love, rather than take us as artists. I mean, I'm pretty sure any artist listening to this on some level feels disgraced by the fact that they're an artist. They feel like they're not good enough for the system and that they don't deserve, like, that, no wonder they're starving. It's because all they do is piss about in a creative world, and that, despite the fact that, it's like you said, art is a necessary part of humanity. But I feel like that is a massive issue of, we're given so much commercialization. We're given, here, get some silicone in your body so that you can wear the outfit that you need, kind of thing. We're not given a pen and paper and told, what do you see? Like, because, I could paint a really interesting picture of what I see outside.
Same, literally same.
But could Joe Blogs on the street that their only joy is to be able to drink away the pain of working 20 hours a day in Primark?
I have a feeling this episode's turning very depressing.
Very.
But that's the thing. When you're put into such a depressive mindset, and when you're placed in such a depressing situation, there's no way you can fight that. Like, I have a level of antipathy right now just because I know for a fact people are inherently very disappointing. They are very disappointing. And government leaders are also inherently very, very disappointing, because the things that we need them to do, the things we ask them to do, they never do it. And it's also a case of, oh, you wanted this? Well, we can work something out, but we'll give you this instead. Yeah,
they sit there and make all these promises, and you've heard it all before. You know it all. I'll do this, I'll do that. Oh, I don't do this. And then suddenly everyone's like, oh, but I thought they were going to this time. No, they never do. Stop falling for it.
No. And that is the inherent problem, is the people that need the help, they do fall for it. And like I wrote in my notebook for the current book I'm working on right now, our rights are paper thin, and they can be easily taken away the moment we are seen to be too noisy, too loud, or when they perceive, where we're perceived as having gone too far. Easily, like, our rights, we are protected by our rights, but our rights are not protected.
It's like, I will admit, I always made fun of a part of the American Constitution, which was the right of free speech. Because so many people I've seen use it as an excuse to be racist, homophobic, whatnot, and they're like, but it's my right to say. And I actually sit here now with the new laws being put forward that would basically make this podcast illegal, as well as journalism would go completely down the drain in that, because we'd all be tried for being spies despite not being spies. And I sit there and go, oh, I guess America got it right. Maybe we should have put that in our laws of, they are not allowed to take away our free speech. Because in our country, they just did. In so many ways. And I mean, hell, if anyone's listening to this and wants us to try to spies, bring it on.
I mean, it's just insane. Like, to be tried as a spy and given 14 years for publishing a story that the government don't like, or the government don't deem in the public's best interest, or that embarrasses them, it's just, they're not even trying to disguise that descent into fascism.
A great quote that I heard recently was from a kid who had been taken away from their one of their parents because the courts had deemed that they weren't visiting the other parent enough. Simply because the kid didn't want to. Like, they had things like school or whatever that was getting in the way, and obviously so they couldn't find the time, and so the other parent had them taken away from their primary parent, and the police were like, we're doing this in your best interest, and the kid just turned around to the police and said, what is my best interest, huh? And we're being told that, we are not allowed to give opinions that are not in the public interest. What is the public interest, almighty overlord? Because my interest is what you're getting up to behind closed doors.
Exactly.
Wank sock.
So it's like, if the government says it's not in the best interests of the public, it's pretty much damn well in our best interest to know.
90% of the time, and I'm pretty sure everyone knows this, the second the government turns around and says it's not in the public's interest to know this, it is in the public need to know it.
Exactly. It just means that they're hiding something shady.
Yeah.
As they all too often are.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've recently been playing a lot of Final Fantasy recently. And I've gotten through part of the story where I realised where British politics came from, actually, which was when they separated church from how the political system works, and like monarchy from how the political system works. We were split into, we had a house to represent the rich, which was the House of the Lords, and we had a house to represent the poor, which was the House of Commons. The House of Commons no longer represent the poor. The House of Commons also represent the rich along with the House of Lords. So a lot of people get annoyed at the way that lords are in that, and generational wealth and a lot of systematic racism and whatnot is what gives them their power. But really irritatingly, they're doing their job a lot better than our leaders are doing ours, because at least they're staying systematically racist and generationally wealthy, while the people who are meant to represent the people that don't have that all have that. They're all lords in everything but name.
See, there's two people actually I can think of who were elected into the House of Lords on either side. One was Conservative, one was for Labour, and they actually came from nothing, and they were both writers. On the Conservative side, it was P.D. James, the crime novelist.
Yes.
And on the Labour side, it was another crime novelist, Ruth Rendell.
I love how it's crime novelists.
I know, but that was the thing. They both came from nothing. With P.D. James, she started out in Oxford. She started off poor, but then she was an NHS worker. She was a nurse, and it was during that time she was writing her first book. And then she went on to work in the Home Office, where she was in charge of police laboratories and stuff like that, though she'd never set foot in a police laboratory in her life.
I'm beginning to notice it's a common thing with Home Secretaries, is they don't know how laws or police work. At least this one was a crime novelist, so she had an idea.
Yeah, and her close work in the Home Office actually fed into her novels. So most, like with her NHS work, it fed into a book called Shroud for a Nightingale, which is set in a nurse training in a nurse training school.
Isn't that what the Nightingale emergency was named after?
And then you've got Death of an Expert Witness, which is a murder set in a forensic crime laboratory, which is also very good. And then there was another book. It wasn't one of her Dalgleish books, but it was a book called Innocent Blood, and it was about the Children's Act, in which children at the age of 18 could register and ask for their birth certificate and find out who their birth parents were. Without the permission of their adoptive parents. Because the law before then in the 70s was that the adoptive parents could hide everything. You weren't allowed to know who your birth parents were. And then the laws, I think it was like 78 or 79, changed all that.
So that you're allowed to know.
So that you are allowed to know.
Ooh, Freedom of Information Act.
Basically, yeah. And then Innocent Blood gave her the money to retire early, and she
Yeah.
made her work. She made her living off of writing. But that fund of information, of growing up, because she was born in the 20s. She was born in 1920, and she lived through the war. She worked as a nurse. She worked as someone in the Home Office. She was also the Director General of the BBC for a time.
Oh wow.
I know, and so she came from nothing. Both her and Ruth Rendell came from nothing, and then made their contributions. They were both given Dames of the British Empire because of the contributions to literature and their work outwards. Because Ruth Rendell did a lot of charity work, and P.D. James did a lot of work in the establishment. But like, she was very comfortable there, but she was also saying, well, no, this doesn't doesn't apply, because she also very famously, I think it was on BBC Radio 4, gave the Director General of the time quite a grilling.
Ooh.
And it was amazing to listen to. But with Ruth Rendell, she was doing a lot of charity work, and they were both instigated into the House of Lords, and they sat in some of the great debates of Britain. And it was also really interesting because they were both on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but Ruth Rendell and P.D. James were best friends.
I mean, you can be friends with having politically
Exactly.
opposing views. Like, and that's the thing I don't understand is Brexit definitely pointed it out in a lot of ways, as did the Scottish referendum actually, was that a lot of people base their entire friend circle sometimes off of simply if they support the same political view. And I feel like that's very, I don't know the word. Dyslexia is a wonderful thing, guys. Don't get it.
It's the only language we really understand and
Oh god,
fluent
I
in.
sound like a representative of Autism Speaks there.
Oh no, let's not. Oh please, let's not talk about autism. Actually, no, let's talk about Autism Speaks, because those devil bitches, I swear to God. Oh no, I hate Autism Speaks with a passion. As someone with Asperger's syndrome, or just autism, depending on what camp you settle in with its name.
On the spectrum in general.
Basically.
We're both around, like, I think we're both roughly around the same area on the
I think we are, yeah.
So.
But it's just like, no matter what, the fact of, especially with Sia, oh God.
Oh, that was
Someone,
a mess.
I know, and someone literally aligning themselves with the only autism charity, I say in quotes, their entire goal is to
eradicate people like us.
cure autism, they say.
Curing.
There is no cure for autism, the same way that vaccines do not give you autism either.
Yeah, autism is not, one, autism is not a disease. Two, it may be a neurological, quote, dysfunction, but said neurological, quote, dysfunction has saved the world on more than one occasion. Albert Einstein, Alan Turing, probably Nikola Tesla, and Thomas Edison. Like, it's just, all it is it's a lot like with psychosis, it's a lot with... It's not horrible until you're stigmatized
I know.
for it.
It is a developmental issue in the brain.
And even then, it's not so much an issue, providing you, like, you're taught in a way that you can understand. Like, my way of processing things, and it's why I'm very, very good at puzzles and equations, is I boil it down to the very simplest that I can get anything. So I'm very quick at maths. While I know that others, like with you, I assume it feeds into your writing in some
It
case.
does.
And you have an encyclopedic memory of authors and books.
See, my autism literally has helped me in so many ways. Like, to begin with, it was like I was diagnosed when I was 6. I wasn't told until I was 16. And when I started, all these interests, they all gathered together.
Yeah.
And it just got wider and wider and wider, and all this interest, and it all feeds into my fiction.
Yeah.
So, like, my knowledge of authors, my knowledge of the English language, the way I can write things and tell stories, my autism helps with that. I would not be a writer. I would not be the writer I am now without it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like with me, it's I'm autistic in that I was diagnosed at around 22, so very late in the game in that. But it explained a lot of the like different tics that I had and a lot of my special interests and that kind of thing. But it's like with you, like all the different hobbies and special interests that I had fed into what I do as a director and as an animator. And yeah, again, it's the same. I wouldn't be the creative I am without it.
Exactly.
It's not an issue. It is literally just, it's like looking at the world from the left instead of the right.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. It's literally just seeing the world in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
In just a very slightly different way.
Yeah, it's like when you're building a car, you're not going to look at only the car, like you're not going to look at the shell of the car and go, I don't know why the engine's not running. It's like, pop the hood, maybe, that might help. And all we are is, we're that popped hood. We're, all we do is look at it from a slightly different angle.
But then again, knowing me, I am that stupid. I'd just be like, what do I do? What do I do? Pop the hood. What button's the hood? Oh yeah.
See, my family are definitely grease monkeys, so I know my way around a car and bike
way
too well.
This is the reason why I will never drive.
I prefer my motorbikes. That's.
I know. I'm sat there just going like, no, I will just hop on the bus or catch a taxi. I will be fine. Onwards, my chariot.
You live in a city, so I mean it's definitely one of the most environmentally best ways as well, is to just either walk or bus it anywhere. Especially if you live in a city, in my opinion, you don't need a car.
No.
Because you spend 90% of your fuel in a city waiting for other cars to move. Like, I feel like it should just be mass walkways and maybe trams again.
Definitely. But no, just... I also find it incredibly telling with the argument of vaccines cause autism. And it astounds me because any parent in their right mind, you signed on for an autistic child when you decided to have children.
Yeah.
You signed on for an LGBTQ plus child.
Yeah.
You signed on for a disabled child.
Yeah.
You signed on for a child. And no matter what problems may arise, or no matter what issues, mental or bodily, that may come from it, you signed on for that child. And it's also, I find it very telling of parents that would prefer a dead child to an autistic one.
Yeah. It's, I don't get it. I mean, I come from a family with a very long history of, mental health issues and that, schizophrenic, psychotics, all the way down. The odd serial bomber and that here and there. So, I come from a family who, when you have a kid, it's going to have some form of neurological tweak somewhere. You don't know where it's going to be, but there's going to be something off. And yeah, to have a kid, and especially if, with my family, you have a history of things like maybe early onset Alzheimer's or arthritis, you can't sit there and be like, oh, I never signed up for a kid with problems. Yes, you did. You signed up for a child, and that means that you signed up to try and raise your child in the way that they need to be raised, to be the great person that kid deserves to be. They are not your money bag. They are not your mini you. They are their own person with their own way of learning, especially if they're autistic. If they're autistic and they're singing away, give them an instrument. If they're, coloring the walls or that, give them a pen and paper. Don't scream at them and hit them until they stop, and don't regret it. Because in my opinion, some of the most wonderful people have been neurodivergent of some kind.
Yeah.
And I feel like if it wasn't for the stigma behind autism, psychosis, and whatnot, many more people would be diagnosed with it.
I know.
Because there wouldn't be this fear that if you're autistic, you're a window licker, as one of my friends like to say.
See, there was also this other post I remember. It was just this old man saying, in my day, there weren't autistics and stuff like that. And I'm sat there just going no, there were.
There were. It's like in your granddad's day, there weren't left-handed people.
Yeah. It's like, no, there were autistic people. You just all hid them away and abused them.
Yeah.
And that's the most telling thing. It's like we are not out of that shadow. We're generally not out of the shadow of that time. And it still feels like to be autistic is something shameful. It should be hidden. Keep it away. It's the family shame.
Yeah.
Like an unmarried mother and stuff like that. And I'm sad they're just going really?
So, just because you're unmarried or just because you're LGBT or anything does not automatically make you a bad parent or a bad child.
No.
What makes you a bad parent is
abandoning them.
Abandoning your kid, treating them like their existence is something for you to suffer through rather than something for you to cherish. That is a massive, in my opinion, parents, in your words, step their pussy up.
It's like I get tired of this sort of mindset when people are like, oh, you're so brave, dealing with an LGBT child to dealing with a disabled child, an autistic child.
It's like, the hell are we gonna do, go on a mass murdering rampage? I'm sorry, but little Jimmy there that's killing cats is way more likely.
and it's just insane. And I think I'm just tired of I'm tired of the current mindset that goes on. But then again, to bring it to a happier note, it also brings us to like what we can do, what us artists can do to change that.
Because that's where we thrive.
That is literally where we thrive. And there's just so much that artists do that makes the world a better place through stories, through paintings, through the visual arts, through animation, through just through storytelling. Every form of art is storytelling.
Yeah, verbal, visual, audio,
dance,
anything. Yeah, any form of art is a way of telling a story, and every story matters.
Exactly. Like the book I've got with me actually here, and I highly recommend all the listeners read it. I also highly recommend I actually would shove this book in everyone's hands. It's How to Write an Autobiographical Novel by Alexander Chee. Alexander Chee is a Korean-American author who's queer, and he's written 2 fantastic books. Edinburgh and The Queen of the Night. They are phenomenal. This is his book of essays, and it teaches you. It's probably one of the most inspiring books I've ever read. I got this at the start of the first lockdown, and it helped me through that because it's probably one of the most inspiring books I've ever read. And it's literally there was in the last essay, it's called on becoming an American writer. And he's talking about going to a class after the 2016 elections in America, and one of his students asks him, what's the point even of writing if this can happen? And in a lot of ways, it talks about also what it would be like with Auden's words, poetry makes nothing happen. And Auden, a poet himself, biggest lie he's ever told as a poet. Because poetry does make things happen. When you think of some of the greatest novels that have encouraged social changes, like Les Miserables by Victor Hugo, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, Go Tell It on the Mountain, The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin, all these books, they've changed people's lives. And they change society because when we look at them, when we read them, we see ourselves and what we can do. Another great proletariat writer and novel, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which was all about the Dust Bowl, and it showed the world what it was like to be an Oklahoman traveling to California, and how the Californians treated these people. They called them Okies, and it just showed how they treated them. And California was getting sick of people coming to California because they thought it was going to be their safe haven. And the Californians hated them. They treated them appallingly. And there were riots, there were beatings, there were people attacking each other in the streets. It was unreal. And the response of the Californian fathers, like the town fathers and stuff like that, from where Steinbeck came from, because he was born a Californian, they burned the book in front of libraries, and they banned Steinbeck from ever returning because they said that he had shamed and embarrassed California.
That's a hell of a reaction.
Whereas Steinbeck actually told the truth. And when Steinbeck was actually in Russia on this sort of writing conference, it was this sort of exchange, and one of the KGB, under the guise of being a journalist, said, how can such a rabble-rouser like you be so patriotic? And Steinbeck, without missing a beat, replied, I told the truth about America in the 1930s because that is the way it was. And I tell the truth about America in the 1960s because that's the way it is. And what your people don't want you to know is that worlds do change.
Well, yeah. I mean, and like me and you, for instance, stand in that same situation. Exactly. Yeah, we're against a corrupt system, and we're against a broken way of life. But we're not against the people of our country. We're not against any people. We stand for them, and that's why we do this podcast.
Exactly. And actually, to quote Steinbeck again, this is from his Nobel Prize acceptance speech, and he said that literature was not promulgated by a pale emasculated priesthood singing their litanies in empty churches, nor is it a game for the cloistered elect, the tin-horn mendicants of low-calorie despair. Literature is as old as speech. It grew out of human need for it, and it has not changed except to become more needed. needed. And I live by that dictum. I completely live by that dictum, that literature has never been more necessary than it is now. Storytelling in all its forms has never been more necessary than it is now.
I agree, and I feel like, and I know that a lot of people probably listening to this are sitting there going, then how am I meant to tell my story? How am I meant to... I'm not good at drawing. I'm not very good at speaking. I know all of these things and that. Like, I've criticized my art countless times. I was, I had a stutter when I was younger.
Same.
So I know what it's like sitting there going, I don't know how to tell my story. And I feel like the best way you can do it is, no matter what's holding you back, do it. The idea of being good at art is an elitist concept anyway. There is no such thing as bad at art. There is no such thing as bad at speaking. Tell your story any way you want, whether it's through movement, camera, written word, spoken word, even just sitting there strumming on a guitar or beating on a drum.
And it's like Oscar Wilde actually said in his preface to Dorian Gray, there is no such thing as a good book or a bad book, a moral or amoral book. There is only books that are written bad or written good.
Yes.
And again, with people who say, and like we've said it before, we've always criticised ourselves like, I'm not good enough for this.
Yeah.
But then you also have to realise that the person who is going to write that book, who's going to tell that story, who's going to direct that film, that person's waiting for you. All you have to do is walk towards them.
Yeah.
Because every word that you put down, every scene and storyboard you make, that is a step closer to the person that has made that piece of art.
Exactly. And I and several other, because I've talked to so many directors at meetings in that, and I am one of the people that immediately walk up to them and just ask, what do you do? Yeah, how are you? That kind of thing. I walk up to them and I, without explaining anything, will just immediately be like, I want to know what makes you tick. And that's always been a very good trait for me in my storytelling and that, because it helps. And I feel like the idea of sitting there being like, I don't know what I'm doing, in a way that's the best way to go through things sometimes, because sitting there just having fun and just being like, I don't know, this building needs to be painted with, the entirety of Dorian Gray or
Basically
that book that you're holding. It just, I just need to write the words on every single brick. Go for it. Basically. I mean, at this point, short of, we've tried riots, we've tried protests, we've tried people getting up into politics and that as a way of breaking the system and that. Why not, instead of trying to break the system and glue ourselves to walls, why don't we change the walls to the color that we understand? Why don't we sing, talk, paint, write, direct? No matter who you are or where you are, your art is your art and your story is your story.
Basically, and I actually can conclude this. I found the piece I was looking for, and I completely believe this. It's not only in America, but it's everywhere. And Alexander Chee says this in his essay on becoming an American writer. Only in America do we ask our writers to believe they don't matter as a condition of writing. It is time to end this. Much of my time as a student was spent doubting the importance of my work, doubting the power it had to reach anyone or to do anything of significance. I was already tired of hearing about how the pen was mightier than the sword by the time I was studying writing. Swords, it seemed to me, won all the time. By the time I found that Auden quote, "Poetry makes nothing happen," I was more than ready to believe what I thought he was saying. But books were still to me, as they had been when I found them, the only magic. My mother's most common childhood memory of me is of standing next to me trying to be heard over the voice on the page. I didn't really commit to writing until I understood that it meant making that happen for someone else. And in order to do that, I had to commit the chaos inside of me to an intricate order, an articulate complexity. To write is to sell a ticket to escape, not from the truth, but into it. My job is to make something happen in a space barely larger than the span of your hand, behind your eyes, distilled out of all that I have carried. From friends, teachers, people met on planes, people I've only seen in my mind, all my mother and father ever did, every favourite book, until it meets and distills from you, the reader, something out of everything it finds in you. All of this meets along the edge of a sentence like this one, as if the sentence is a fence, with you on one side and me on the other. When the writing works best, I feel like I could poke one of those words out of place and find the writer's eye there, looking through to me. If you don't know what I mean is this. When I speak of walking through a snowstorm, you remember a night from your childhood full of snow, or from last winter, say, driving home at night, surprised by a storm. When I speak of my dead friends in poetry, you may remember your own dead friends, or if none of your friends are dead, you may imagine how it might feel to have them die. You may think of your poems, or your poems you've seen or heard. You may remember you don't like poetry. Something new is made from my memories and yours as you read this. It is not my memory, not yours, and it is born and walks the bridges and roads of your mind as long as it can, after it has left mine. All my life I've been told this isn't important, that it doesn't matter, that it could never matter, and yet I think it does. I think it is the real reason the people who would take everything from us say this. I think it's the same reason that when fascists come to power, writers are among the first to go to jail. And that is the point of writing.
I think that is a very, I'd say beautiful, but that doesn't quite do the term justice, really, for how it's apt that is.
It is beautifully written, and it rings true, and it hits you like... Yeah. It strikes you like a bullet square in the chest, smacked into your heretical heart.
Taking the grammar and the word usage out of it, the message that sends is, at its core, it's what art is. And I agree.
Literally, Alexander Chee is probably one of the best modern writers I've ever read. And hopefully me reading that out doesn't get us copyrighted.
Fingers crossed not.
Fingers crossed, I hope not.
It's not like we make money off this podcast anyway.
Absolutely
I'm sure that YouTube can't sue us.
But no, definitely read Alexander Chee's book, How to Write an Autobiographical Novel. I would encourage any artist, whatever they do, to read this book because it changes lives. It really does. And art changes lives. It has always changed lives. Yeah. It's made the world a brighter and better place. And like Chee says, it's not a ticket away from the truth. It's a ticket into it.
Yeah, and it's not even just writing. There's so many different levels of art that no one even thinks of. Like, exactly. Think of old. I mean, I'm not gonna say gun forging or that because that doesn't work. But like old weapon forging, like how they made battle axes and shields. That was an art. That was. People express themselves and tell their stories in thousands of different ways.
And glass blowing. Oh my god, the beauty that is glass blowing.
Indeed. So, although it's a bit earlier than normal for the episode, last episode ran over by quite a bit. So I feel like, honestly, that quote there and a bit of homework for all the listeners and that, if you feel like it.
If you feel like it, of course.
Yeah, I feel like tell your story, like even in just a few words or just a picture or a forged blade or a welded piece of scrap, glass blowing or singing. Tell your story in any way, and if you even feel wanted to, link it down in the comments. Like, let us see it. Let us see how you tell your story and the story you have to tell.
We'd love to hear stories.
Yeah, and we love to see them and celebrate them because I feel like everyone needs to celebrate art a lot more, especially now more than ever.
Exactly. Art's probably the one thing that's going to get us through. It got us through lockdown, and no matter what any government tries to do, though this government right now has cut funding to the arts by 50%.
Yes.
In no way are the arts going to die because we refuse to die, and we remember.
Yeah, we cut our funding all you want. We will come back, and every single time they try, we're coming back harder.
And we will come back stronger.
Yeah. So, yeah, as... on a finishing note, tell your story. Check out, again, Ryan's reading list down in the bottom of all the beautiful books. The one that had that little excerpt from it will be down there as always. And just, be free to be and express who you are. This may have been a slightly more depressing episode, but the message is still the same of no matter who you are, you're you, tell your truth, express yourself without fear.
See, and I would say the last thing is always begin with truth, end with art.
Yes.
Always end with art, because art is beautiful and so are you. Tell your stories, like Ray says. Just be there. You are part of probably one of the greatest parts of our history, where art no longer symbolizes petit bourgeois. It no longer represents those who have money. It represents us, the people.
Yeah.
It now represents us down below, the normal people, the people who will fight back when called on to do so.
It is the language, now it is the language of the oppressed, and it is a language that we should and will, at least the very least me and you, will scream from the rooftops and paint on the pavements.
Oh god, yeah, until we're blue in the face.
But yes, on that note,
we shall leave you all to it. Thank you all for listening. Remember to stay safe, wear your mask, and look after each other.
All the way through.
Exactly. We've gone through hell just now,
Yeah.
and now is not the time to stop thinking of each other. We should always be thinking of each other and how we can help each other get through, because it may be said, dark times lie ahead, and it's only by sticking together do we get through, and that we come out stronger.
Yeah. So on that note, you'll hear us next week.
And next week, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.